My name is Jamie. I'm from the London Environmental Network, and I work as a residential sustainability specialist. And I'm really excited to be having this webinar with you guys tonight. So we'll just go through slides here. Today, we will be doing water conservation, waste, and green space. I promise it'll be a whole lot of fun. So just as a quick reminder, if you could keep your microphone muted throughout the presentation, just to minimize background noise. If you have any questions throughout, feel free to pop them in the chat box. And as well, if you're having any connectivity problems, we can send you the link to the webinar after. So don't worry, you'll be able to see it in the end. All right, so just for a quick agenda, today we're going to be talking about water conservation and then waste management, and then moving into green space and best management practices. We'll have time for some questions and answers at the end, and then we'll all head out of here right around 6:30, so you can all get some dinner. So here's just the overview of our webinar schedule. We are getting to the end of this awesome series, so be sure to check out tomorrow night as well, as we talk about some tools and resources to help you on your retrofit journey by Nicole from the London Environmental Network, and as well we'll have Project Neutral there, so it'll be a good one to attend as well. And keep an eye out for the tour of the pilot project. That's going to be really, really awesome to see in all of its glory. So the London Environmental Network supports local environmental organizations by building their capacity and ability to deliver on their missions. We connect with a bunch of different groups in London, both members and volunteers, and we have some programs as well, as I'm sure most of you know who have come to some previous webinars. Now we have partnered with Chippewa of the Thames. They are a member organization now. Now they had established an energy plan in 2020 aimed at improving energy efficiency, reducing energy costs, and assessing renewable energy solutions in the community. And we are very happy to be working with them to help be part of the plan, building the blueprint, so to speak. Now, this is a pilot project to build a near net zero retrofitted home. We've been working to establish a residential sustainability program there to help them all divest from fossil fuel based heating and cooling, as it's very fossil fuel intensive. Now we'll be building on this program over the next couple of years, and we're very excited to be offering it through the Environmental Network and Chippewa of the Thames First Nations. Now, there's a couple general themes or caveats that I want to talk about just before we get into this. So in a lot of cases, both in retrofitting your home or in easy swaps, the most sustainable solution is the one you already have. That's why we say, use your light bulbs before replacing them with LEDs. There's no point in wasting resources that we've already extracted and are already made into products. So keep that in mind as a tip throughout. As well, I'd like to mention that every action does make a difference, especially collectively when you're talking as a society or as groups who kind of band together and start doing some of these, whether it be behavioral changes or retrofits. It does make a difference, and it's important to remember that because sometimes it doesn't feel that way. And then finally, making sustainable improvements is a privilege. It's a privilege that not everyone has access to. It's very financially intensive for the most part, especially when you're talking about like large home retrofitting projects or industry changes and things to that larger scale nature. So today, the London Environmental Network, we're going to try to offer some low cost DIY type solutions for you. But please keep in mind that when we're saying like, this is a great option, if you can, right? Not everyone has the chance, so we'll try to give a broad scope of what you can do in your home. Now we move on to the money part. No, I'm kidding. Is water conservation, and we're going to be starting just with a little bit of a why. So I think it's kind of funny to think about sometimes conserving a renewable resource, right? It's in the name, renewable. Why do we have to conserve it? Well, it's for a couple reasons. So first of all, this image on the right here is showing that we only have access to about 2.5% of water as fresh water. And then in that 2.5%, you've got like 21% that is accessible and available to be used by humans and by everyone else for drinking water and all of our production and that kind of stuff. As well, Canadians naturally are pretty bad at conserving water. This image on the left shows on the global context, and per capita, per gallon, per day, Canada ranks third. So obviously there's room for improvement there. But as water is continually degraded by our actions as humans, whether that be agriculture, pharmaceuticals, some of this water isn't available to be renewed and used again. So we got to protect what we've got. Now, we'll talk about some easy swaps to start here. These are things that are relatively easy to implement in your home. And the first one is faucet aerators. So they just screw into the ends of your faucet there. They reduce your water usage by introducing oxygen into the water to displace the water usage. They have some fun benefits like reducing splashing, making your water taste better, but they will help you cut down on your water without you even noticing. And they're pretty cost effective at $5 to $10 per. And you can also clean them with like vinegar and those kinds of solutions to keep them functioning better longer. Now, secondly, rain barrels. I'm sure most of you know what they are, but they're a great way to save water that's coming off your roof and your eaves trough. If you do a lot of gardening, landscaping, why not use some water that's already fallen right into your lap, so to speak. They catch the water by attaching to your eaves trough and are safe for later use. Now, they can be a little bit more expensive at $60 to about $200 each, depending on what kind of model you want. And the London Environmental Network has done rain barrel sales in the past at about $60 to $100 each. So keep an eye out for that in the spring as well. And just something to be aware of with rain barrels is it's important to close them during periods of really heavy rainfall or snow melt, just because you don't want them overflowing and the water sitting right near your foundation. That can cause problems. So just close them right up, divert it during the periods of heavy rainfall. Now, low flow shower heads as well, they function almost identically to faucet aerators, but they're for your shower. So you replace the whole shower head. They do the same thing. They introduce air while reducing the water flow while maintaining pressure. They don't, I think, change the taste too much in that one, but not that it matters. As well, cleaning them efficiently and regularly will help them working well over time. And as well, these also are pretty cost effective. You can get models as cheap as $25 up to $200 or $300 if you're looking for some fancier ones. Now, when you're looking at appliances, obviously that's a lot of water usage coming out of your household. So 2 easy things you can look for when you're ready to get new appliances or you're transitioning to some new models is looking for the WaterSense and Energy Star logos. So they are externally managed, but they kind of show the top 10, 20% of models on the market. And it's easy as a consumer to know that you're buying something efficient, both energy and water-wise, just by looking for those labels on your products. Now, once again, when replacing the appliances, the most sustainable one is the one you have until it's not at a point of functioning or it's costing too much. That's when you really want to look into replacing them. Now, as well, you can DIY a low flow toilet really, really easily. You can also buy a low flow toilet, but for the cost of an empty package and some water, you can most of the time just fill up this container with water, some rocks if it's heavy, and then you just add it to the back basin of your toilet, and that will displace the amount of water that would traditionally go there. So each flush, you're using less water while your toilet functions the exact same. So kind of a easy DIY for you there. All right, now for some behavioral changes associated with water conservation. So around 70% of our freshwater usage is coming from agricultural production, and 60% of that specifically is for livestock production. That tells us that a whole lot of our water is going into producing the food we eat. So when you're looking at beef, it's over 15,000 liters of water for 2.2 pounds, and chickens over 4,300 liters for 2.2 pounds. And that is something that you can very easily reduce. Cutting meat out of your diet 1 to 2 times a week, maybe just for one meal, whatever you're really able to do. It'll help out the wallet with the cost of meat prices lately, and it also is going to have benefits such as reducing the water that we're spending on how much meat we eat every year. Another easy thing you can do is store your excess clean water. So when you're waiting for the water to heat up, leftover water in cups and whatnot, you can throw them in a big container and use it for watering your plants or whatever you'd like, really, kind of like an indoor rain barrel. It's really easy to implement and can help reduce how much water you're wasting. Now, another big part of water conservation is preventing all this wasting water to begin with, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about flooding and flood prevention coming up, but also some things you can prevent putting down your drain. So you want to be looking around your house indoors for like wet spots, mold, mildew, dripping faucets, running toilets, looking for cracks or holes in the foundation, check the roof of the home. You want to know where water is pooling during periods of heavy rainfall and snow melt, looking for clogged gutters, and anything else that seems odd or problematic to your home. So a average size leak, a very tiny leak of 1/16 inches of water wastes around 387 gallons of water a day. That's like the equivalent to a kiddie pool in a lot of cases. That's a lot of water just sliding out in your drain every day without you even knowing a lot of time. And as well, with the whole flooding and why you want to avoid it, it's the #1 most reported household insurance claim in Canada, and it also costs homeowners an average of $42,000 per flooding incident. Now, that is extremely avoidable in a lot of cases when you're preventatively looking around your house for these issues as they're starting to occur. Another thing you can do to keep your pipes in good shape is avoid putting fats, oils, and greases down them. They do make fat, oil, and grease cups that you can get at any public library in London. And if you fill them and take them to an Enviro depot, they'll turn them into a green biofuel for their operations, which is super neat. As well, you don't want to be putting food remnants, hair, baby and makeup wipes, feminine hygiene products, all of that down the drain, as well as pharmaceuticals and chemicals down the drain. You want to search before you're putting any of those down the drain because a lot of times they'll cause clogs, they'll cause backups, big issues in your drains that cost a lot of money. And as well, pharmaceuticals and chemicals are really not able to be filtered out of our water for a lot of cases. And they end up building up, like in Waterloo region, I believe there's an issue with artificial sweeteners staying in because all of that is being used so much by humans, and our stormwater or our wastewater cleaning infrastructure just isn't at the capacity to deal with all this so much. So try to keep it out of the drains when you can. Now, as well, you want to have someone checking in on your home when you're away on vacation or gone for a few days. A lot of people who have their homes insured with policies for flood prevention, you will have some policy number for how often someone has to be checking in. So whether that's every day, every few days, you want to look at what that is and make sure you're meeting that condition in the case that you did have a flood when you were away and it's just getting worse for days on end, becomes extremely problematic. So as well, a really easy preventative measure that you can do is purchase flood sensors for your high risk areas. They're just little tiny sensors that you can attach on the floor near the baseboards or on the walls there, like whether that be in the basement, around your laundry room, anywhere that you're kind of concerned about water issues down the line. They're about $25 to $200 depending on how fancy you want to get, but hey, $25 pop is a lot better than $42,000 for repairing flood damage. So as well, there's a lot more extensive flooding prevention measures that are out there. So whether that be a sump pump and a backwater valve installed into the basement, typically the sump pumps have a sump pit installed and it pumps the water away from the low point in the home, away from the home, sometimes to the city sewer or just away from neighboring homes. Additionally, backwater valves are also an option. So they attach to your city sewer line and they're designed to only let water flow in one direction. So when there's a lot of water, a lot of snow melt, the city lines, sewer lines can become quite overwhelmed. This causes water or sewage to backflow in towards your home, but the backwater valve will prevent that. And that's especially important in London, given that it's a dual sewer system. So the stormwater system and the wastewater system do combine, right? So in periods where it's extremely weather intensive, you're getting a lot of rain, sometimes they become overwhelmed and they just can't handle that capacity of water and they're forced to discharge it into the Thames River. So that's where we see some water quality issues. And as well, a lot of homeowners get stuck coming back up their pipes. And some flood prevention measures for outside the home. A catch basin is a great measure. It's kind of like a sump pump and a sump pit, but outside the home for like cooling water, overland flooding, things of that nature. So you catch it into a catch basin and then it's pumped either away from the home and neighboring homes into a reservoir or into the municipal sewer system. Now they're about $300 to $800, kind of depending on which model you're going with. Now as well, this isn't pictured here, but downspout diverters are a very low cost option to extend the rainwater away from your foundation in your home. I'm sure you've all seen them before. They're just like the extensions that come off your eaves trough, and they push it away from your foundation to ensure that water isn't penetrating the soil and then seeping through your foundation. Now, finally, rain gardens. They're an excellent backup resiliency measure. So they can hold about 30% more water than a traditional lawn. And they also have some benefits like being low maintenance, drought tolerance in a lot of cases. They attract pollinators, butterflies. They're very nice to look at too. And they do also help prevent flooding in your home. Now, if you are considering a rain garden, it's important to know that you do need a backup method. You can't solely depend on the rain garden to protect your flood or your home from flooding. And that's just because in times of heavy rainfall, when saturation occurs, the water still needs somewhere to go. So you can't have it as the one-stop shop, but it's a great option to beautify your yard and help get rid of some of the extra water. All right, and that is the end of our water management part of the presentation. So we'll move on to waste management now. So I briefly want to just talk about who the biggest culprits are in residential waste. Now, when the government of Canada did a waste audit of Canadian homes, they found food waste, plastics, diapers and pet waste, paper, textiles, rubber, leather, other organics as the main components found in garbage. And I would love to know if you guys notice any trends with kind of the short list I've mentioned. I'll give you a second, but if not, I'll tell you the answer. Feel free to pop it in the chat if you have any idea. You think where I'm going with this one. All right, I'm impatient, so I'm gonna kind of tell you. It's organics, right? So much of our garbage, it's organic based. It can biodegrade, but a lot of it ends up in our landfill anyways, and that's not ideal. So we're gonna first talk about making changes where the problem begins. And often that's over shopping for products. So I know I fall victim to this as well. When you see a good sale or something that looks really nice, something fun and seasonal, you end up buying it and then you don't end up using it half the time. And this ends up in the garbage at the end of the day when it spoils or you forget about it for a couple of years and then it's over its best before date or whatnot. By like meal planning, sticking to grocery lists, knowing what you're there for, it can help avoid impulse purchases to a degree. You can also do a fun little cooking challenge where you challenge yourself to however many days you're comfortable with to cook with only what you have in your fridge and your pantry, kind of reduce the food stockpiles and reduce the food spoilage that you're experiencing. Also, another fun one is making swaps to package lists, zero waste products, whether that's just looking in your traditional grocery store for package list options, reusing bags, or if you're shopping at a local store like Reimagine Co. in London, which is a zero waste grocery store. You can also use reusable produce bags. I find these really great because you just throw them in your reusable bags and then you don't have to get all those little plastic bags when you're shopping for produce at the store. Now, as we were talking about organics, what's the solution to all the organics? It's composting. Composting and green bin use, right? How nature's always done it. So when you start a compost pile, there's a couple of important things to know. You want to look at your carbon versus your nitrogen producing products, which you can very easily find online as like this screenshot just from, I believe, Earth Easy, where it kind of shows what the end result of putting these into your compost pile is. Now you want roughly 1/3 green versus 2/3 brown material to help balance out the carbon versus nitrogen. Now, carbon is pretty much always good in compost piles because it reduces smells, helps your pile break down faster, keeps it healthy. But what you're going for is creating a very hot and nutrient dense environment that allows the microorganisms to flourish and want to reproduce and then eat all of the leftover garbage in there and turn it into that lovely black gold that we gardeners always talk about. Now, vermicomposting can also be really great if you have a smaller space and you're not afraid of some little wormy guys hanging out in your compost, it'll break it down faster. It does help with the smell a little bit. And it is great for smaller spaces. And if you have young kids or grandparents, it also can be like a fun little science experiment, get them involved in it as well. All right. Now, obviously, with composting, I'm sure anyone from the City of London is thinking, yes, but we're supposed to have a green bin. And this is true. They were hoping it would happen in 2022. Now they're hoping 2023. And while we don't have it happening now, we can talk about what you want to do when this program rolls around. So it's really just important to be noting what goes where, the same with like traditional recycling or garbage. The biggest takeaways is you only want organics going in your green bin. Now you can use a biodegradable plastic bag to help reduce odors, keep it clean. But some things that you can kind of throw you off that you'd expect to go in the green bin that don't, like cotton swabs, pet fur, wood-based items, and as well as biodegradable plastics. They are advertised as biodegradable, but it's mostly due to the level of heat isn't sufficient enough to break down those biodegradable plastics that we are seeing coming to market. Now as well, in the time while we are waiting to get green bin programs, we can talk about some options. So they do make countertop composters. They're pretty funky. They've come to market in the past couple years, and they're great if you really are keen on starting to compost, but you don't have room for a backyard compost pile, or if you live in an apartment, something like that. There's tons of different brands on the market, and they cost about $200 to $400, depending on what you're looking for. And it is kind of important to note, like, they aren't true composters. They do have an artificial heating element, and they do have a grinder. So they're kind of expediting the process. And it's not as much like the black gold that you see at the end of a compost pile, where it's more of a peat or loose topsoil, but it's still very nutrient dense and excellent to like throw on the top of your houseplants or whatnot. As well, if you aren't looking to fork out the big bucks, you can support Urban Roots London and donate to their community compost plot. Now, this helps support local food systems by giving them nutrients and helping support their soil supply, but it also helps keep it out of the landfill. Now, obviously, you'll need a vehicle and you'll need some time to go out and do it, but if you can, it's a great option to still keep your organics out of the landfill. Now, sorting your waste properly. We hear it all the time, but it's so important because recycling, at the end of the day, is a business, right? So they recycle what they have a end value for. Things that will create value at the end of being recycled, that's what they want to recycle. So when things come in all messed up, a lot of garbage in the recycling, they don't have time to sort through nickel and dime everything. It'll end up in the landfill, right? The same goes for when we wish cycle. So that's when you take something and you're like, this could be recycled. I really hope it's recyclable. I'm going to put it in a recycling bin. That can contaminate the piles, contaminate the bins, and sometimes they just don't have time to deal with it, and it results in the whole bin going to landfill instead of being recycled. So important to note, just be aware. If you don't know where it goes, put it in the garbage. You can also Google this a lot of the times too. As well, Recycle Coach has an app for local jurisdictions for you to be able to figure out what goes where. They also have some fun reminders when it's garbage day, or you can do little quizzes to make sure you actually know what goes where. Excellent solution to the problem. And all else fails, if you have something like obscure or kind of random that you're not sure, you can always call your local recycling authority and they'll happily find an answer for you where it goes. Now, obviously, we've all heard reduce, reuse, recycle. That also is the order that we should be doing this as well. So reducing what we're using, which we've talked about in our food waste. Reusing is the next. So here we are. Reusing stuff whenever possible is great because it's already made. The product exists. When you can keep it alive or keep it out of the landfill longer, it's going to be better overall for the product life cycle. And as well, it often is cheaper a lot of times too. So whether that just be like using your pasta jar for plant cuttings, like it's that picture there, or having clothing swaps or donating, the longer you can keep these products in circulation, the better. Now, it is important to note about donating. You really want to make sure that the products you are donating are high quality and could have value to others. Donation sites receive so many donations all the time. They only have the space and capacity to put around 25 to 50% of it on shelves. The rest ends up either in landfills or overseas, where a lot of times they don't want the product either. So if we can reduce the waste coming away from donating as well, that'd be great all around. Now I am going to pause. You can stop hearing my voice for a moment, and I'll get Mackenzie to play a quick video around circular economies versus linear economies. It's kind of a practice that you see regarding the whole society and waste usage. So it's kind of how the system's built. It's higher level, but hopefully you'll find something interesting for it.
Living systems have been around for a few billion years and will be around for many more. In the living world, there's no landfill. Instead, materials flow. One species' waste is another's food. Energy is provided by the sun. Things grow, then die, and nutrients return to the soil safely. And it works. Yet as humans, we've adopted a linear approach. We take, we make, and we dispose. A new phone comes out, so we ditch the old one. Our washing machine packs up, so we buy another. Each time we do this, we're eating into a finite supply of resources and often producing toxic waste. It simply can't work long term. So what can? If we accept that the living world's cyclical model works, can we change our way of thinking so that we too operate a circular economy? Let's start with the biological cycle. How can our waste build capital rather than reduce it? By rethinking and redesigning products and components and the packaging they come in, we can create safe and compostable materials that help grow more stuff. As they say in the movies, no resources have been lost in the making of this material. So what about the washing machines, mobile phones, fridges? We know they don't biodegrade. Here, we're talking about another sort of rethink, a way to cycle valuable metals, polymers, and alloys, so they maintain their quality and continue to be useful beyond the shelf life of individual products. What if the goods of today became the resources of tomorrow? It makes commercial sense. Instead of the throw away and replace culture we've become used to, we'd adopt a return and renew one, where products and components are designed to be disassembled and regenerated. One solution may be to rethink the way we view ownership. What if we never actually owned our technologies? We simply licensed them from the manufacturers. Now, let's put these two cycles together. Imagine if we could design products to come back to their makers, their technical materials being reused, and their biological parts increasing agricultural value. And imagine that these products are made and transported using renewable energy. Here we have a model that builds prosperity long term. And the good news is, there are already companies out there who are beginning to adopt this way of working. But the circular economy isn't about one manufacturer changing one product. It's about all the interconnecting companies that form our infrastructure and economy coming together. It's about energy. It's about rethinking the operating system itself. We have a fantastic opportunity to open new perspectives and new horizons. Instead of remaining trapped in the frustrations of the present, with creativity and innovation, we really can rethink and redesign our future.
All right, so obviously that video isn't necessarily true to what we're working with as a society now, but I felt like it was important to discuss a little bit because while it's a bit idealistic and not maybe representative of our current state, it is truly the core of what we're getting at when we're trying to reduce our waste, reuse, reduce water and energy usage. This is what it looks like at the end of the day. It's mimicking a natural cycle a bit more, and overall just harvesting the most out of what we've got. So I hope you guys learned a little something in that video, but we're going to move on now, and we're going to talk a little bit more about waste management very briefly, and then we'll move into the final green space category of the evening. So just some fun future trends I wanted to mention for waste management. Eco-bricking, it's a very neat thing to do. So it's you take all your leftover plastics, your tiny plastics like your chip bags, your saran wraps, whatever it is, you cut it up and you stuff it into large clear bottles, whether it's water bottles or pop bottles. You stuff them literally until you cannot fit anymore. And how it works is they become so dense, they're actually quite structurally sound, and you can use them for fun little projects like this picture here, where it's talking about garden beds and how it can be used for that. But in larger scale operations around the world, what we're starting to see happen is people can build and donate eco bricks to other organizations where they'll take them and like build homes and buildings. It's very rapidly evolving, very new, but something neat that we're creating something out of our waste. And additionally, kind of as that video was hinting at as well, holding businesses accountable for their waste. It is the future. So obviously consumers, our buying power does speak to some decisions that we like to see, and we can make changes, but as well, it really is up to the businesses to make changes to their infrastructure and how they operate as well. So this photo here is just from a company called Case in Toronto. They deliver reusable food containers to restaurants and cafes around Toronto, and they exchange them for dirty ones, and they're just constantly reused around different restaurants. And I think it's really neat too. It's a solution to the takeaway box problem that we see when we go out to dinner. All right, now green space, best management practices. This one's a personal favorite of mine as well, I gotta say. So we're going to start off a little bit by talking about managing invasive species. So invasive species often aren't labeled, right? A lot of plants we love, like ivy, herbs like mint, they are invasive. They can really take over. You want to Google what kind of plant, if it is invasive, and just be wary of what you're doing with it. So you want to avoid planting them directly in the ground if you can. And if you are planting them in the ground, be sure to stay on top of maintenance, making sure they're not slowly taking over your yard, your old oak trees, whatever it may be. As well, when you are getting rid of especially invasive species, but when you're getting rid of plants in general, you don't want to be throwing them into naturalized areas that are usually unmanaged. It can become really problematic down the line. And although mint isn't typically what first comes to mind when talking about invasive species, I did have to add this as a personal takeaway, because my lovely mother decided to plant mint in her garden a couple years ago, directly and against the advice. And she is now dealing with it, creeping into the neighbor's yard. It's creeping past all the fence lines, it's all the way into the regular grass as well. So don't be like my mom. Don't cause yourself problems down the road, and just keep them in planter boxes, keep them under wraps. It'll save you a headache down the line. Now, as well, I did kind of hint at this already, but what else can we do to limit our waste for our green spaces? So if you are sick of a plant, don't want it anymore, you're done with it, try to give it away to a friend or a neighbor, hold a plant swap. Try not to throw it away right away. If you can find a new home for it, that's always going to be better. If you are going to reuse items, that's always great. So you can reuse pots pretty easily, as well as soil. If it's coming from healthy plants, and it isn't super degraded, hasn't been in there for 20 years, you're probably fine to reuse your soil as well. Reusing your perennials, knowing which plants are going to come back, save you some money and helps your garden out. And you can return pots to nurseries a lot of the times if you don't want them, especially if you got a stack like the image on the right there, so they can be reused later on in their organization. Now, if you're getting rid of soil, you can spread it out across your yard, obviously, because it's very easy for you to manage anything that comes from it there. Or you can get rid of it in the bin, but something to be aware of, if you are getting rid of it in a bin, it needs to be dry. If it's wet, it's going to be so heavy. Garbage trucks have limits on what they can take, right? So if your bin is 300 pounds because you got a load of wet soil in there, it's going to be rejected. You're going to be stuck with it. You're going to have a garbage pile up. So don't do that. Make sure it's dried out if you're getting rid of it that way. And as well, don't dump your excess soil and your plants, as we've said, in naturalized areas. And that's because invasive seed pods like burdock, a really common one, it can last in the soil for like 60 to 80 years. That's such a long time. You could be the cause of a new invasive species in Ontario and you wouldn't even know about it because it happened 40 years after you dumped something in a forest beside your house. So don't put them in naturalized areas, especially is a really big key here. Alrighty, now the fun part, making something out of nothing. You can make your garbage work for you, make it go further. So tin cans are great for pots. You can just plug some holes on the bottom. And if you have grandkids or kids, having them paint them before makes it a fun little activity. As well, you can use things like water bottles and plastic fruit containers as greenhouses for starting your seedlings. They work quite well with a little bit of modifications, just putting some drainage holes in them. You can also use egg cartons and like cardboards to start seeds, and they're excellent because they are biodegradable. So if you don't want to deal with having to take everything out, you can just plant them right in from the cardboard, which is kind of fun. As well, if you're looking to expand your garden, expand the space, you can put cardboard down over top of like your grass or the weedy area you're looking to take care of. It'll kill everything within a few months. And then you can also lay mulch over top of it and then plant it. Something to be aware of is just the time frame. So you want to be sure that you are not going in too quickly. The cardboard takes a bit to biodegrade. So just something to be aware of there. As well, you can plant and save seeds from almost everything you buy at the grocery store, whether it's like peppers, tomatoes, zucchinis, things to that nature. You can also grow really fun ones like lemons and limes, avocados, coconuts. You're unlikely to get fruit from some of those really specific, especially like avocados and your passion fruit. We're not in their native environment, so it's really unlikely to get them to fruit. And the same goes for a lot of these trees. They need friends, so to speak. They need to be in a larger population. So you're unlikely to get them to fruit, but I mean, I personally have a bunch of avocado trees that I have sprouted from seeds, and it's a fun little science experiment as well. Anything that you're buying with root systems still attached, so herbs like green onion or lettuce, you can propagate it, put it in some water until it grows root system, and then plant it up, and there you go. Free produce just like that. As well, any potatoes that have gone to seed, keep a hold of them. They can be planted and regrown really, really easily, very little work. And also there's really fun natural products that can replace synthetic ones, such as loofah gourds. They're a zucchini, tastes like zucchini, but if you save them and dry them, you can use them as sponges and shower loofahs, and they're completely biodegradable. So how fun. Alrighty. Additionally, you can use trees to your benefit. So to protect your home from heat in the summer and cold from the winter. And you do this by planting deciduous or the leafy trees from the south and the west side of your home, and then the coniferous or the evergreen trees on the north and east sides of your home. And over time, they will, as they grow, work to protect your home, and they'll also lower your electricity bills a little bit. All right, more fun DIYs. So we've all seen those old ugly filing cabinets. Every office has them. A lot of homes have them too. Instead of getting rid of them, or if you find one, make a raised planter bed out of it. Those things are so expensive, and you can make one for pretty well free. You gotta remove the drawers, gotta add some drainage holes, away you go. As well, you can add cardboard, leaf litter, and sticks to like the bottom third to a half to kind of reduce the amount of soil that you're gonna need to plant in that area. If you want a greenhouse, you can collect old windows, find them on Facebook Marketplace or on the community. And with some a little bit of additional lumber, you can make a summer greenhouse. There are options for making it year round as well, but obviously that's a little bit more cost intensive, as you then need to worry about things like temperature regulation. Finally, you can make DIY vertical gardens out of large plastic bottles. Simply by cutting a hole in them and then painting where the roots will go to keep it nice dark for them. It's great for like strawberries and tomatoes and that kind of stuff, like climbers. And it also is great if you don't have a lot of space. All right, what else can we do? So composting. We've talked about composting, but it's a great way to work towards a backyard ecosystem by turning your scraps into fertilizer and soil for your plants. Having the rain barrel allows you to use the water that you've already got as well. Now, having things like bug hotels and bird houses in your backyard can help you naturally manage insect populations because the native bugs, the native birds, they like munching on some of those more damaging or invasive insect populations that you can have problems with, like things like thrips, aphids, things to that nature. All right, and mulching. Mulching is another great thing to add into your backyard. It's very common for aesthetics, but it also does have some benefits as well. So things like preventing soil erosion, maintains temperatures, maintains the moisture level when it's really hot in the summer. But as it breaks down, it's actually going to add nutrients back into the soil for you as well. So kind of like a natural fertilizer. As well, you can also call around to local tree removal companies. When they're doing maintenance, they clear trees, they have to pay for disposing their waste. So if you find one that's willing to donate it to you, you could get a whole bunch of mulch for free. But the kind of things to be aware of is you may not have control over what type of mulch it is, what it looks like, when you get it, how you get it, but you get a bunch of mulch for free and then get rid of the rest on Facebook Marketplace for free or something. All right, saving water in the green spaces. These topics are all interconnected tonight, I'll tell you. So native plants are naturally a lot more hardy and drought tolerant than seasonal and annual plants. So something to be aware of when you're picking plants for your garden as well. If people are interested, we do have a list of local nurseries and native plants that we can send around in the post attendee links later on as well. Burying clay pots in the ground, it's a very, very old practice. They're known as oyas or olas, depending on where you're from. They kind of work as like a drip irrigation system, but underground. They slowly disperse moisture and water to your plant's roots. They're also great when it's really dry and the top of the soil gets all compact and isn't really accepting much water flow. You can ensure that water is still getting to your roots. As well, companion planting is always going to be a great thing. So whether that's for beneficial nutrient sharing, like you see with the three sisters, or companion planting for insect management, all great options there. Now, another thing we want to be aware of is limiting phosphorus use in our green spaces. So this is through things like cleaning up your leaf litter, especially around stormwater drains and where stormwater is collected. And it's also through limiting the amount of synthetic fertilizers, insecticides, fungicides being used in your yard and garden. This is for a few reasons, but primarily it's for preventing eutrophication. We'll talk about what this is in the next slide. But essentially how it works is it's a result of a lot of phosphorus buildup in our waterways. So you see the natural process through this second picture here. A couple of trees are going to drain into the lakes as normal, like the leaves are going to fall into the lakes. And it's normal because it's a small amount, right? But as humans, we like to make things reach their maximum capacity, so to speak. So this third picture of a subdivision with modern stormwater infrastructure, all of the leaf litter, all of those leaves are going to be sent right into that pond. That causes a lot of phosphorus buildup over time, and it tends to cause something called eutrophication. Now, I know you didn't sign up for science class, I'll be quick. So it's a natural process that occurs when nitrogen and phosphorus enter the waterways as a result of biological decomposition. So because we've sped up this process and really pushed our stormwater and our waterways to its limit, it causes a ton of extra nitrogen and phosphorus in the water. Now, this is really yummy food for the phytoplankton and the algae present in our waterways, and it really causes them to kind of explode in population. That's when you see the massive algae blooms happening, all the funky colors, but it also does some really horrible things, like causes a low oxygen environment, low light environment. It makes it very difficult for other species to survive, often creating things called dead zones. It's also highly toxic to like humans and other animals. So we want to be aware of it because it can cause really bad illnesses, death. You want to avoid it whenever possible, but we also want to prevent it wherever possible. All right, a couple more slides here, but befriending the birds. Birds are lovely and they do a lot for us. And some things we can do to keep them nice and happy is limiting having cats outside, whether that be on leashes or through catios. Very fancy cat patio. It'll prevent them from taking out the native bird populations because they are really prolific hunters. They do a really good job, which is unfortunate for the birds. As well, when you're feeding the wildlife, check what food's right for them. You know, what species are you getting? What food do they like? And be sure to sanitize kind of regularly. Like we do have a lot of illnesses related to birds going around. You don't want to be supporting that in your own backyard. As well, you want to be sure you keep filling the feeders in the winter. And that's because a lot of these species that stick around, they've had a really dependable food supply all year, and then winter comes, everybody stops filling their feeders. And then this food supply is just gone. And they end up really struggling in the cold weather now with a complete lack of food supply that they've had for the past 8 months. As well, having your outdoor lighter on timers or motion sensors helps birds maintain their flight pathway as they do use the stars to migrate, help them figure out their way. And if you do have problems with birds hitting your windows as a result of reflective surfaces, you can get bird stickers. They're really tiny, cost effective for the most part, and really easy to install, and they are really effective at reducing that problem. Now, some fun future trends I would like to talk about in green space. So vertical hydroponic growing. So this is using water systems and a little bit of nutrients to grow most often produce in a soilless environment. It's great because you can grow a lot more in a lot smaller of a space. You can grow indoors all year long. You use less water. You don't need soil. You need a lot less fertilizer, insecticides, fungicides, all around. Great solution to the problems that we have with modern agriculture. Finally, lawn to pollinator yard makeovers. So traditional grass lawns, they're just monocultures. They don't do a whole lot for us, and they do require a lot more work and water than other native species. So replacing your lawn with more valuable, beneficial species, it's becoming more popular, and it's not just for the looks, it's for like the actual benefits that it provides to surrounding ecosystems, surrounding agricultural systems. If you have a veggie garden, this is a great way to encourage more pollinators, and it just has a lot of benefits. And I would like to thank everybody for listening to me ramble for the past hour almost. I really hope you learned something. I'd like to thank all of our sponsors for making this possible. And now if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or to speak right up. I'd love to answer any questions you have.
Jamie, have you heard if the green bin program, like when it's slotted to come to London?
We're saying 2023 right now, Marianne. I know we've been really hopeful for 2022. They were having like fleet problems. I believe they could only get a half fleet in. So while it's out of the city's hands, so to speak, hopefully it's sooner than later. It'll really help us out, I think.
Thank you.
All right, I'll give a last call for questions if you're thinking about anything.
I have a question in the chat, Jamie. I'm going to pull it up. Is there a way to make a pond without plastic rather than a rain barrel?
Without plastic, I'm gonna say most likely no. Like you do need a liner for most naturalized, like whether it's just like a little stormwater retention pond or whatnot. You need something to hold that water, like soil, sand. It naturally, the water will naturally infiltrate it over time. So if you're looking to hold that water there, you do need something synthetic to keep it in place.
And then there was someone that's asking about potentially clay, or I was wondering about maybe rubber, which is still like half synthetic, but.
Yeah, clay would definitely be better. If you did a really solid layer of clay, yeah, in theory that'll work. But if you're getting really intense storm systems or winters over time, that could fault. But clay is definitely an option if you're hoping to keep it more natural. As for getting worms, I think you can order a lot of worms online as long as you're being careful that they're not invasive worm species. And I believe, Marianne, do you know if the wormery sells worm or they just produce them for local use?
I don't know offhand if they're selling them, but I'm sure they would if you put in a request. We have a video on Green Economy London's YouTube channel of Dan from the Wormery, which is at the Western Fairgrounds, where they're using vermicomposting for all of their food waste. And Dan is a really swell fella, and he could potentially, he'll either give you some or tell you where to get them.
Yeah, I think the Wormery is a really good option if you're looking for local worms. Thank you. So Mackenzie's also just put a link in the chat to the Grove where you can purchase worms. There you go. Right to the solution for you, Kate. Do we know of any grant programs that would help pilot project for solar vertical farming? Not off the top of my head. I would love to. That sounds amazing. Maybe, I'm just trying to think of the available grant programs.
We'll be doing, like, I'm not sure what the scale of the project is that they're chatting about, but we do have the Environmental Action Incubator coming up every year. We take 6 participants and you get $1,000 towards an environmental project. So I'm not sure the scale of the project or if that would be helpful really, but if it was a smaller, like residential or community one, then it could potentially help for that. So that's through the London Environmental Network. And Mackenzie can pop in a link for the incubator program. And then I think if it was a larger scale one, I would check out the Community Foundation. So London Community Foundation provides some funds to different projects and is eager to work on the neighboring First Nations as well. And
yes.
then,
No, you go ahead, Marianne.
I was just going to read Kate's comment out, so you go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Kate. People helping the people in the chat. We love it. Kate says to check out the Ontario IESO for solar grants as well. All right, we'll give it another minute or two. Anyone with any last minute questions, go ahead and furiously type them into the chat, or you can just shout out to the world as well. We don't mind. All right, there are no more questions. Speaking slowly to give you a chance if you're typing still. But if there are no questions, I would just like to say thank you. Thanks for attending. Thanks for listening, being a part of the webinar series. We're very excited to be offering it. And if you have any questions, want any resources, you're welcome to reach out to me. My email is at the bottom there, and jamie@londonenvironment.net. And if that is all, let's see, no more questions. Yeah. All right. Well, you guys have a lovely rest of your evening. Have a nice warm bowl of soup or something for the cold weather out there. And be sure to check out the final part of the webinar series tomorrow night, where Project Neutral and our very own Nicole Karsh will be joining us to talk about resources and tools that you can use to really get going on your retrofit projects. All right. Thank you all for joining. Have a great night, everyone.